let's continue that exact conversation. That's a really interesting line of questioning. As I said, I was inspired by the themes of the World Tourism Day summer webinar that some people held, Brian Applegarth and others from the Cannabis Tourism Association. And one of the key points that they talked about was sustainable tourism and how that can help to benefit communities, society, the world at large. And but what you're saying is that as we try to progress cannabis, the cannabis industry, the legal requirements that are being imposed upon operations is actually deviating from any sustainable development goals. I mean, how that's an interesting concept.
Specific, you know what I mean? HVAC.
Okay.
Right. In my space where I'm moving into cannabis hospitality or on-site hosted cannabis consumption, issue comes down to the HVAC. In the United States, as you know, we've banned smoking in many indoor commercial businesses. And when they first tried to do that nationally, the push was to say, you can't smoke here. And business owners pushed back. Individuals said, wait, I have this right. And they rescinded those laws. A few years later, those laws came back in the United States, and this time they made it about employee protection, which is important, right? To anytime you're offering someone a job, you have to make sure that the work conditions are livable. And so the concern from a policy standpoint is we're moving now into smoke-filled rooms. And so they created these international standards to create what would be a safe space for the employee over an 8-hour workday. What that means when you talk about cigar, hookah, and now cannabis consumption indoors is a 100x increase over the normal HVAC requirements for a commercial space. And more than that, if you know anything about HVAC, most air conditioning systems, most heaters benefit from the recirculation of air. If it's a forced air system, it's a recirculation of air. So as you recirculate that air, you can add heat and build heat. You can strip heat and cool the air as it recycles. In this case, the system requirements required 100% of the air to be fresh air. So forget a 100x increase in required movement of air. Now, 100% of that increased standard of moved air has to be fresh air. Now, if you think about it, there is no benefit then of recirculated air. You're pulling in the middle of winter in Denver, Colorado at -6 degrees cold air from outside. And you have to heat that 100 times more volume than your space would otherwise require instantly to 70, 72 degrees. In the summer, it's 100 degrees here in Denver on our hottest days. And now your system has to strip all that heat out. In my case, based on a 950 square foot room, I'll have 950,000 square feet of HVAC. Just imagine that.
I mean, so what's the cost of differentiate? I mean, how much cost does that add to even just the build?
I didn't even get to the cost part. I told the city very clearly. Yeah, I wouldn't even have built it because once it's built, it's built. Once it's built, there's no change in it. Once it's designed and built, in this case, that's it. And so now I'm either operating with that for 15, 20 years going forward in the hopes to recoup the life cycle of that equipment. And if policy changes, then you're operating inefficiently compared to what new standards might allow. It's not an easy fix. I've been working from the beginning because, again, sustainability, at least making sure I'm aware and conscious of the impact of the enterprise on my environment, on my community, and on our bottom line. First and foremost, to my core, it's inspired by the fact the inefficiency of the system was something I could never live with. On the other side, from a cost standpoint, like I said, the peak of winter -6, the peak of summer 100 degrees, stripping that heat, adding that heat in the different seasons at, in my case, almost 2,800 pounds of air, cubic feet per minute of air, significant volume, that the cost of that would have led to electric bills that for the 950 square foot room attached to a 12,000 square foot hotel, we were projecting bills 3, 4, or 5 times higher than the 12,000 square foot place required for this 950 square foot room.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So what lobbying is there? Are there conversations with the lawmakers to address that? I mean, what is the approach? I mean, are we going to strip the system, allow for it doesn't? I mean, what is the solution? What is being proposed as the solution to that?
I said to the city that I was eccentric enough to build what the engineers had designed because I'm intent to see this through, but I wasn't crazy enough to turn it on. And in that meeting, what I said to the head of engineering, head of environmental, and the head of our regulatory body here in Denver, I said, does anyone have the power of an amendment here? Can we do equivalency or better? And lo and behold, one of the three chimed in, the head of engineering, that there is a path. I am now working with the city on that path, but it becomes an amendment to code that would be a one-off exclusive to my business, though I am now sharing what I've learned and what I believe the city is going to approve with other operators, though I'm taking away my advantage. My ambition here is to see cannabis hospitality succeed, and cannabis hospitality will not succeed if we all have to go and one-off figure out this solution. And I do not want anyone else to run into this as a roadblock or a barrier to their progress. And so the reality is we are now looking to get approved with the city a system that will recirculate a significant amount of the air, more than 2/3 of the air in the room. Will scrub that air to an equivalency or better than the standard of clean air established by international standards. The ability to recirculate then will let me build heat, strip heat in the seasons so that I can gain the benefit of compounding the addition of heat, compounding the extraction of heat in the seasons to get to hot and cold. And that, what we're projecting from an efficiency standpoint, will recirculate and recover about 7/8 is the ambition or the goal right now. What it looks like on paper, we'll recover 7/8 of the energy cost associated with the heating and cooling. I'll still be moving 2,600, almost 2,800 cubic feet per minute of air through the room. So there'll be no savings on the energy costs associated with volume of a system. But the heating and cooling becomes that unknown exponential potential cost when you deal with different seasons and varying seasons that literally just pointed to a system that couldn't work. This could work. The system from a production, from a sustainability, and from a cost standpoint didn't.
Hasn't been implemented as yet, so it's kind of it'll be like a trial, effectively.
Once the city approves, it won't be a trial, will be an approved. Like, we can't build it until the city signs off on the amendment. I can proceed to construction right now with what I have, which is this really inefficient system that meets the standards, but that nobody would build. Nobody would build this. Why haven't we seen new cigar shops or new hookah lounges really in America, and certainly not in the middle of major cities? Right. Because anytime you're in a jurisdiction or a municipality that's applying these standards, this is the standard. This 100x of cubic feet per minute required to make it a safe space. Is
that a national standard? I mean, because I'm also thinking when
international.
If things do change, international.
International.
Okay, so
it's an international body that meets annually. Okay. That regulates and defines basically best practices or norm standards within the HVAC systems and community. This all goes back a dozen years ago when that international body, they increased this threshold to 60 cubic feet per minute per person to move in response to these anti-smoking initiatives that have taken off around the world. Again, all geared towards employee protection and what it means then to, in a smoke-filled room, create a safe space. What's interesting is that about 2.5 years ago, this international body came to a new conclusion that there is, in fact, no space that's safe to be exposed to smoke. And that's where this amendment comes from. That local municipalities can now say, okay, as long as it's an equivalency standard, we can make adjustments. And that's why some new cigar lounges and hookah lounges have started to emerge again in the United States over the last 2 years. It all just follows. Here's the fun part. The fun part is we're talking about cannabis, but we're also talking about normal policy and standards for a smoke-filled room that apply to other industries that have been actively engaged and legal for many, many, many years. That's a testament to how far we've come with cannabis, that we're not stuck having these one-off weird conversations that are just unique to us. We're having very normal conversations around policy, around permitting, as it relates then to cannabis hospitality. And at least in that, I find the smallest of victory or a reason to have hope for the future, that we are moving now as a policy process, not just as a social justice, social movement cause to get legalization. We've gotten there. And the stigma is now dissolving enough that we're just now navigating through policy.
That's what I'm wondering is I mean if something is affected at the national level, it's just still then up to the states. They can once again kind of do kind of
Oh,
what they want.
it'll be up to the
So,
city.
I mean, the
This is
municipality itself.
HVAC is controlled by a local municipality and often a city or a town. In many cases, often not a county. And so what you'll find in a couple jurisdictions in America, you have what are known as unincorporated counties or portions of county government that don't then also live in a city. And so you're governed just by the rules of the county. County rules then in many cases don't govern HVAC. This is something the purvey of a city, in this case, Denver. And once then you get into a city and then think the next city over could have different rules, may have no rules at all.
Right.
They need to implement rules so that you can proceed. So there will be some operators that will open lounges. There are some lounges that are opening in spaces that do not regulate indoor air quality, but Denver's not one of them, and neither's Las Vegas. That next great wave of 40 licenses that have been approved in Nevada. The question now comes down to not just building it. We're going to see a number of people build these lounges. The question is going to come down to long-term viability, the ability to operate those assets long-term to recoup the investment in the build-out, but then also to absorb and cash flow what is going to be the expense and cost of heating, cooling, and air movement. Vegas standards are even higher than Colorado standards, likely something that's going to get fixed in rulemaking committee in the near future in Nevada, and needs to. But in Colorado and in Denver, they went with international standards, which is a per person standard. And then depending on the volume of the floor, how many people can it hold, the ceiling height actually becomes an advantage for me. If I had a higher ceiling, I'd have to turn the air in the room over less frequently, not move less volume of air per minute, but the air in the physical room would turn over less frequently. In my case, I have a low ceiling, a small room, and my system will turn the air over every 3 minutes or 20 times per hour. This is even a higher rate of circulation than required in a hospital emergency room, which is 15 turns per hour. In Nevada, their standard went a little different. They didn't do it based on occupancy. They did it based on the number of times a room turns. So in Nevada, the rules not right now require the room volume of air has to turn over every 2 minutes or 30 times per hour. And if you think of Las Vegas, many rooms in Las Vegas have really high ceilings. These aren't 9-foot high rooms. These are 40-foot high rooms. And now you've taken the floor footprint can only hold so many people. That doesn't change, but you added 4 times the volume of air through height in the room. And so that Nevada standard, in my case, would have required me to build a system that I already think is ridiculous. That's even 50 times more powerful than what I did.
You see, I would have thought, I mean, I think in many ways logic would make somebody or Megan is joining us, but let me finish this thought. Yeah. Logic would suggest that the larger the space, the more aerated, I guess, that it would be. But because we have
right, so if 60 CFM was the standard in Nevada,
yeah,
and you had a 40-foot ceiling, you, in my case, I have a 10-foot ceiling. I have to turn the room every 20 hours, 20 times an hour, every 3 minutes. My ceiling was 4 times as high. That would be once every 12 minutes or a fraction. Right, 4 times as high, 4 times fewer turns. I'd be turning the room 5 times per hour to meet the same 60 cubic feet per minute per person standard. So that's where, again, we talk about then what happens once local municipalities get involved and start making rules and adding their 2 cents. What happens in this case? Likely someone was trying to get them to a 30 CFM standard, which may have been very workable, but they ended up with a 30 turn per hour. And again, 30 turn per hour. The space that works then is the smallest conceivable space you can carve. If you can create a shed, that makes sense in a 30 turn per hour scenario.
Right.
But
that's not a cannabis lounge because you want the space so people can commune and come together. So
I'm building a 950 square foot lounge in a 12,000 square foot hotel that only has 9 rooms. And some people say, oh, wow, your hotel's not very big. And I'm listening to some of the largest operators in the country coming out of Nevada claiming that they're going to be building lounges that are 700, 800 square feet.
That brings up what
I know
13 just announced this. I mean, what I have, of course, never been. Well, let me introduce Megan. Megan, please, you can turn on your camera and your mic. Meet Chris Chiari.
Hi, Megan.
Very interesting. I was gonna, as I just pronounced, I was literally gonna ask you, is it Italian? Is it Chiari? Is it what? Okay, anyways,
it is Chris. Italian, so it's that
okay, all right, Chiari.
Sound of the
I was literally just.
Hi, Megan.
Good morning. This is Megan. She's one of our writers, and working with us and putting in fact an article on ganja tourism. Together, so I wanted to have her join us to tap into some of the issues that we are facing globally. Jamaica, they do one thing. I think they did not the one thing, but the a thing they did right was that they right off the bat they belong for ganja lounges. So that is absolutely not an issue. There are not too many. I don't know why. I don't think they have the stringent requirements. Of course, it's also Jamaica. So, I mean, it says you can have the open air spaces. You don't need to worry about winter and so on. The main mitigation is heat and the weather. Really weird to me when I'm seeing the battles that you guys are facing in the U.S. Even despite the just the cannabis, you're really building out an industry, but you have this one fundamental factor of where do people convene and commune and consume.
We've normalized production. We've normalized sales for over half the population in America. Now, not half the states yet, but half of our physical population now lives in a legal state. But yeah, here we are 10 years after legalization in Denver, and we still don't have hospitality. Yes, we have one lounge that's open that is truly an amazing experience. It's Jad's up north of Denver. They're in unincorporated Adams County. And what I love about it is they're trailblazers. Josh is doing it. He's open. He's selling cannabis. I go there and sit down at the bar with other people. We're all coming from different walks of life, different spaces and places, but we're sitting side by side consuming cannabis in a commercial space. And I just can't deny, and I enjoy that. And I look forward to experiencing it more frequently. Been to Amsterdam several times, and every time it's still a joy to sit down at the table and consume and not look over your shoulder. I still call up a particular friend from high school every time I walk out of the dispensary and say, I just bought again, and still get this giddiness inside that is the product of the suppression of this product in this market for most of my life, for multiple generations in the United States and internationally. And that even now, 10 years into legalization, even where I don't have any concerns, I'm consuming in my home, and my possession, my use right now are all established and allowed. Even there, it's still refreshing. It's still nice. It's still a relief.
Absolutely. I think it makes a fundamental difference. I mean, I know that people who have consumed, people who don't even consume at this point in time because they're still scared. Like, oh, I tried it once and, I got, anxiety attack. I certainly want to experience that again. It's like, well, that's because the scenario, you're probably huddled down in some little corner smoking it and heard the noise and then you started freaking out. It's like, if you
that paranoia was always a product.
Paranoia will actually subside, especially when it goes through this really scary.
But some of our friends like alcohol. Right, you've been to a bar, right. You know that one friend that can drink all night, you never even knew they touched the drop. Right. One friend that one drink and they become a mess.
Right. Yeah.
And their bodies are just clearly processing alcohol in a different way. And cannabis has that same rate response. I've become very comfortable. I'm a consumer. I find joy, benefit, all the enhancements to food, to music. I love cannabis. I enjoy consuming cannabis. But I also recognize very clearly that some other people don't. And to normalize this, destigmatize this, to truly get to that last frontier of normalization means that there's room. There's room for someone to not like it. There's room for someone to not consume. It's room for someone to have a different physiology and a different path to their enjoyment and pleasure of life. And so right there, we have room for that. But even with that one individual who knows that they can only have one drink or only to have a sip, they still go to the bar with their friends, right?
Absolutely, so exactly. And they can still participate in the social experience that this whole life really is, Absolutely.
But even worse than the anxiety, which is a reality, is many people who do consume, knowingly and willingly consume, find themselves overly relaxed. And from a cannabis hospitality standpoint, it's why I'm doing what I'm doing in a hotel.
Right. So you don't want people feeling overly even. That's one thing that I'm actually is I guess is somewhat of a concern, is that if things do really open up and we have this random people jumping in, taking edibles, and really having a really sedative effect on them. I mean, we are gonna get people basically passing out in lounges and in spaces like this, and that could give a negative connotation, but it really comes down to experiences and accessibility. I mean,
that comes down to staff and location.
Right.
We use in Colorado, where we say start low, go slow. The idea is to help you figure out what the impact on your body is. If you don't know the reaction, you don't know if you're a 1 drink or a 10 drink tolerance, excuse me, that becomes a concern, right? So start low, go slow helps you find that. But that's a great slogan. Bud tenders, the name we've given to the individuals who are selling the product, are very informed, know their product, have a responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, to take the time to answer questions, especially for new consumers. But what happens after that into a hospitality environment is, I think we get the opportunity to take it to the next step, where we can now start to talk about effect. Ethan Nadelman, who was with the Drug Policy Alliance for a long time and is doing extraordinary work in the psychedelic space now, used to make this comment about the lowest needed dose to get you to the greatest intended effect. And that path for each individual, and I use that word, will be individual. And that path then needs a guide. And it's something why we'll never see cannabis and alcohol alike, is because they do interact with our bodies in a different way. And I think cannabis consumers have already shown that we engage each other, and that our goal is not just to get someone messed up. At least those of us that are now mature, that are in this industry, we're not just trying to get people messed up, trying to help people find a path to enhancements or potentially enhanced moments or periods of their lives, where the consumption of these products then can, with the achievement of that greatest desired effect of the lowest possible dose, to knowing your reaction and having people around you who will be responsive if you find yourself uncomfortable. That's where it changes. And that's where we can get rid of some of that anxiety. If I overconsume, what will happen can be now muted, because we now have, whether it's the foods you eat that complement a strain to increase the effects of certain physiological reactions to strains, or to mute that, now can become part of that engagement. Encouraging people on consumption, asking the question, how much do you smoke? Oh, I've never smoked before, is a great place to say, take a puff or two, put it down, pass it to your friend, have a bite to eat, relax and hang out, and get up and leave the second you feel uncomfortable. Having that level of engagement control, people knowing that getting up and leaving, right? Sometimes people get into social situations and they don't start to think individually, they think a little bit as a group. But it's important around cannabis and cannabis consumption that we make every individual feel comfortable about the decisions they're making, informed, and more importantly, in the kind of curious or uninformed space, so that we go beyond bud tender and we now go to curated experience. I'm not handing you the cannabis. I'm gonna bring your own cannabis. You are making all these decisions yourself.
Educate.
But that doesn't form the way what I see as the responsibility of the venue to make sure that there's engagement.
Let's get to that, because that's actually interesting, because you're speaking of the bud tender, the responsibilities of bud tenders, but from my understanding there, and I believe it's the same thing in Jamaica, there is a huge turnover rate with bud tenders. So that's
pay. That's management. I was a dispensary owner, and the very first thing I said to the managing partner was, let's unionize. Let's give our team, let's be the first ones to do it. We were both from the progressive left. I thought it was going to be a slam dunk. We were going to lead on this issue. The reason I wanted to do it is when cannabis first opened, we were $18 an hour jobs for bud tenders. It was recognized that a skill set and a knowledge base was an important ingredient. And so when we still were at $7 minimum wage at Denver and $12 was the prevailing wage, cannabis was at 18.
Right.
And my comment was, let's lock this in as a floor.
Right.
And instead, I was ridiculed because I happened to be with an owner group that came from the restaurant space. They were very much against unionizing. They think any
Yeah, I can.
And I was just flabbergasted. And I was like, how are we both coming from the same political viewpoints in the world? And then if you look at cannabis today, it dropped to 15. It dropped below that to minimum wage. And we started driving turnover. Young, ambitious, passionate people who were as enthusiastic about cannabis as anyone in a C-suite, and nowadays way more than most people in C-suites on these companies, are turned over like they are disposable. And so we have no, but we still expect them to have a knowledge. We still expect them to
be educated,
expect them to have their compliance, training, experience. And yet we treat them like expensive.
The absolute bottom rung. But as you're rightly saying, is that what people do need is curated experiences, which leads to, and we'll get into what you're doing specifically soon enough. But that's
not this much time.
That's an interesting. That's interesting because I'm thinking, because then there is that puts an onus on hospitality providers to provide that space, that education, and that knowledge, and
gives us room to differentiate ourselves by the level of which we do that, the depth of knowledge we have, the culture of our business. You come in, you recognize culture the second you walk into a hotel. You know if that team is part of a team or if it's just people at jobs. It's part of the culture. It's the difference between a great experience at a hotel and just staying at a hotel. Right?
I mean, so how do you,
where the economy drives wages dramatically even lower than what I'm talking about, the businesses that come in and recognize and reward great team members to keep them part of what they're building. We're going through a major inflation wave, right? Everywhere in the world. Right. I just did raises for the staff yesterday. It was time. And it wasn't because anyone asked. You have to stay in front of that, right? And I had the choice. Do I raise wages at the 5% that wages have increased over the last year, which is a documented statistic in America, or do I go on the inflation rate?
Right.
And so I went off the inflation rate because at the end of the day, the individuals that helped me keep my hotel running is one of the highest rated. We're number 4 out of 16 in our category in Denver. That's up from, I think, 12 of 16 when I bought the business. We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't be there. And I would not have the business I have without the team members helping every single day.
All right. So let's get into what you're doing as well. Let's say if you franchise out, how are you going to carry that culture to the next phase? Because I will tell you, as you were just saying, in the bar industry, I mean, they'll any C-suite person will laugh at trying to raise a bartender's salary. They're like, what the hell? They get tips, they get this, they get that. That's how they get paid. I mean, I've worked in bars and clubs. I mean, my salary was way under minimum wage, and I had to be nice as hell to everybody because I was almost solely tips. And these are your corporate entities, and this is how they function. How are you going to change that corporate culture into, I mean, it makes a lot of sense with cannabis, but then there's the C-suite in cannabis that don't seem to get the cannabis culture. Right. And now you've been speaking about having these curated, that this should be a standard, a level of curated experience.
It's going to be the difference of who truly survives or not. It's going to be
at the end of that, I guess.
You know,
but I mean, you'll get pressure from your shareholders and your board members saying, no, you can't be paying them $15 in 5 years, it'll be 20. I mean, they'll be like, hell no, bring that down to 11. That's the federal standard. That's all we need. How are you gonna?
I will push back against that, and I would push back against that because from the foundation of the business I'm trying to run, we are built around a culture of respect from every level. Every team member is as valuable as any other. I might be a titled position at the company, but I show up and I pull shifts. So when I pull shifts, I am pulling my shift. I am doing the work because we all do work that supports another component in the hotel. And no shift can undercut what needs to be done because it undercuts then the operation of the hotel. head down and do your work is important. But then also, right, we're a hotel. I run off of, and I've been told that this is the Hyatt model, but I have no hospitality experience, but for the 4.5 years I've now been involved with the Patterson Inn.
Okay.
What I recognized when I first came in is that the most important thing to do is to take care of that guest right in front of you. That even the guest trying to call you to book a room tomorrow, who's not even there yet, we'll get to them. But it's that guest here right now, immersed in our experience. And so from the second you walk in the door, from how you're greeted, to how you're engaged, to being brought to your room, to the amenities we now have on the property beyond just overnight, which was what I started with. I now have a tavern open to the public and the expansion into this cannabis lounge, all the way to helping you on the way out the door, right? That's important. We don't ask for reviews. I made it a point the day I bought. Maybe I didn't know what I was doing. I said, we do not solicit reviews. I don't ask you for one. I don't have tags up on the glass at checkout saying, please remember to give us a 5-star review. We do not ask. Our negatives overrepresent, but our positives are true. And what I say to the team is this: there's 2 signs that we're doing our job right? Someone takes a picture of breakfast before they eat it, and then they clean the plate. Look for the second. The first is beautiful. It looked great, but it's also got to taste great. We do that. And then, everything from beds you don't want to get out of and breakfast you don't want to sleep in on. That's the core of what we do. And now adding this fun and exciting event. At its culture, here's how we take it as culture. Okay. It's first and foremost, you build the team that is a reflection of what you want to execute, and that can scale. I'm not looking to be 1,000 hotels around the world. I'm not looking to be 100 hotels across anywhere. I'm looking to be 12 to 15 to 18 locations that become intimate in major cities and big locations. I hope to be a part of a saturated hospitality industry related to cannabis in the not too distant future. But I'm already in a saturated industry called hotel and overnight hospitality. And the way you differentiate yourself is through your offering, through how you execute. And in a very crowded space, overnight hotel and hospitality, there is still room for boutique properties to succeed. What differentiates us that makes us different? Well, in the near term, it's this on-site cannabis hospitality lounge that we're on the verge of starting construction finally. Last hurdle is the city and this HVAC plant. Once that's cleared, we're ready to go.
All right. Well, let's talk about the Patterson Inn a little bit, and also your fundraise, because even your vision also affects your fundraise. I wouldn't say with just how widespread you can cast your net, because you do have those who are like you're Mr. One from the Shark Tank. It's like, I just want money, 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 money. You're like, I'm trying to build a culture, something that's sustainable. That's very different. So yeah, let's talk about the Patterson Inn. Where is it? You're at 420 something. You kind of
Patterson Inn is a 130-year-old property in Denver, Colorado. It's a boutique hotel now for the last 10 years, opened up in November of 2012. So celebrating our 10-year anniversary. It's at 420 East 11th Avenue. Okay. Fortuitous address, multi-generational awareness of this number, and what we're now using it as part of our branding. I originally looked at the property 12 years ago, and it was abandoned, old abandoned house. And I remember the first time I saw it, this has curb appeal. If you went to pattersoninn.com, you'll see a red brick French chateau sitting on a hill, right in the heart of Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood, blocks from the Capitol. I can actually see the golden dome of our state capitol from several of the windows of the property. It had a fortuitous address over the door, even as an abandoned house. The address was 420 at 420. It screamed. It said to the house 12 years ago. I looked up, I pointed to the property, and I said, I want to turn you into a marijuana bed and breakfast. I missed it by 2 weeks. The people that I bought it from 4.5 years ago went to contract days after I had seen it. They are the ones that turned it into a hotel and operated it for the first 5+ years. And I saw it back on the market in January of 2018. Had been living in Denver for a few years. By that point, I actually moved here in 2013. Looked at saw that it was for sale, and knew I have always had the same intention. I just updated the website for the 420 hotels. So the 420hotels.com. THC420 hotels with an S.com. And you'll see pictures of the property, but also you can edit out.
I will. Well, maybe it might work. I will see.
Damn it! See, so this is annoying.
Well, no. Look, I try to smoke when I'm doing my work, and it does. It increases time. It's all
Oh, I lose my train of thought not smoking. I'm turning 40.
This is true. At least when I am consuming it, well, that's why, it's not because
Cognitive decline has already begun.
Thank you. I'm trying to say that that's not enough. I just had a birthday as well, so that's what I want to think about is aging. But that's interesting. So what? So there was that 6-year period. Am I right with the math? Where you saw it, you identified you wanted it. Someone else took it, and then it came back on the market. But you always had the idea of having a cannabis space, consumption space, well, cannabis hotel, cannabis B&B. Okay.
You edit that out. Here's the thought. If anyone wants to know what I've been up to, on the website I just posted, the 420hotels.com, I have a section with news articles. And the most recent is up the top. But if you go all the way to the bottom to the 9th article I posted, it was written 2 weeks after I purchased the property in the summer of 2018.
Right.
And the headline is Buyer Nabs Capitol Hill Mansion with Marijuana in Mind.
Okay. All right.
That's the day, that's the week, that's 2 weeks after I bought the property. So no one should have ever wondered what the intention was when I bought it. It has always been the intention. I actually wrote.
It took so long. I'm surprised that it was still available to you. I mean, did you not try to move on to other properties, or just like that was too much part of the vision?
I live in Denver. I actually maybe went a different route by investing in a dispensary and being involved in the retail sales side for a minute, and heavily involved in the policy side. So, certainly immersed my life in the space now for 12 years. Been very forward as a consumer, well engaged in all the other things I do professionally and personally. So that was always there. But no, this property, it tells a story.
Okay.
The address over the door, the curb appeal of the property. When I saw this so many years ago, I knew that the house already had a story, and a pretty long story. And at best, if I ever got the chance, I'd be adding another chapter. Well, this is that other chapter. That this storied house that has played a part in Colorado's history is now one more time adding a piece to that history. We have distance restrictions, and this is becoming true in every jurisdiction that's bringing either retail, cultivation, or hospitality. And what it specifically says is that you have to be a fixed amount of distance from schools, daycares, drug treatment facilities. Right? This is Denver's restriction. When I bought the property, Denver had we hadn't even put hospitality in place, but as we moved towards it, they created this map. And virtually the entire area of Capitol Hill where I'm located was red. Green was go, red was stop. Can't go in a red. The city went on to require individual property owners like myself to come with our own surveys to confirm our suitability. But I was told several years ago, and just didn't know it because I hadn't done the survey yet, that I was a green dot in a sea of red. So somehow, fortuitous, let's talk about fortuitous, this property, its history, the number over the door, and it just so happens to fit the distance restrictions. It is 1,000 feet from any other or more of any other conflicting obstacle. And so why this property? Why not another? There is no other like it. And when I looked at this hotel, when I looked at this abandoned house all those years ago, yes, I said I wanted to turn it into a marijuana bed and breakfast, but I also recognized the potential for this location to establish the foundation of a story that could transcend one location and move to others. The intention is to build a chain of small, intimate boutique hotels where we convert underutilized event space into cannabis hospitality, not to create a club or destination in a neighborhood, but to create an enhanced amenity, a new added refined experience that differentiates our overnight hotel accommodation from another option.
Right. How does
even
the
if we saw federal legalization tomorrow. Good. Sorry.
I was gonna say what about the neighborhood? How supportive or how many I guess supporting amenities do you have within the neighborhood? Are there well, two questions. In fact, will you have a dispensary on site, and do you have say dispensary
No.
within the neighborhood? What's the neighborhood like?
I went with a bring your own. So Colorado allowed us two models: either retail sales, similar to a bar, like a pint of beer, or a bring your own cannabis model. I went with bring your own cannabis. The reason was, if the goal is hospitality, and I want to say you can smoke that here. If you've ever been in a bar, you know you can't bring an outside alcohol into a bar. And even in the few places in the world where they might allow it, bar owners very rarely let you bring in outside alcohol into their bar. You're undercutting their cash register. And so what the rules say, in fact, in Colorado, both for alcohol and for cannabis, is if I am a retail sales point, I have to, by law, bar your use of any outside product. So my goal is to create a hospitable place that says you can smoke that here. But, oh, did I just see you pull a joint out of your pocket? Where'd you get that? Where'd you get that? You can't smoke.
Wait, that's by law. I mean, shouldn't that be an individual business's policy? It's like
no,
jurisdictions
in other states.
You could bring you could bring your bring your bottle of rum into my space and let's just all get drunk and party.
That is true in some places in the world, in some states in America, but that is not true in the state of Colorado. And
law.
Yeah, so I actually just got my compliance
law. I would think that was a policy. This is the way things operate, the way people function. But if it's legal, it's law.
No outside alcohol. So under the rules around cannabis hospitality, if I am a retail sales point, I have to stop and, in a sense, police your use of outside product. So
how possible is that? I mean, because you're going to roll it up into a joint.
40-person capacity room. It'll be staffed, but it depends how hard is the state going to scrutinize businesses on that. But I'm a big proponent of live by the rules and don't look over your shoulder. Because you can do a lot of creative stuff in the world if you're not trying to figure out how you're always trying to game everything. Again, when I said I was in the dispensary business, that was my former business partners. Maybe that was the right way. That's how they operated, right? Do what you want to do and then deal with and clean it up when you need to, especially if you have the political relationships to pull that off. And I just don't have those relationships. And I'm trying to keep a mortgage. I'm trying to cash flow a business. I've got a team of 7 employees, which is small, but still 7 people's lives and livelihood that this business then is responsible. To just sit there and play fly by night is just not. I'm moving into the security space as far as bringing on equity, stockholders, shareholder, investors. It's not, I can't move into that level of maturity for the business if I'm still operating with the level of immaturity to think in the system, because that's how you get ahead. Cash flow is a wonderful thing. And many people who run just in the cash flow business space make a lot of decisions and have a lot of latitude to make individual and unique decisions that are right for them. In this case, I've added this complexity, which was always the goal, because complexity means legitimacy, right? As I've moved through different stages now, my first crowdfund campaign was on Republic. I went through an independent outside valuation. I went through outside legal review, so that when I say that the 420 Hotels Inc. owns Patterson Inn and operating in Colorado, owns Castle of Quality, the property owner in Colorado that owns 12 Spirits Tavern, with the tavern now open to the public in Colorado, and owns 40% of this pending lounge, the 420 Denver. Outside legal has confirmed that paper trail is sound and this contract exists, and the 420 Hotels owns these assets. So that legitimacy.
All right, I want to get to your fundraise for a bit, but then if you're not selling cannabis, so you're effectively building a space for consumption. You're not selling cannabis. What is the business model then? Is it just because you're hotel guest?
I'm overnight hospitality. So food and beverage. That you'll
can you serve food in the lounge?
Bring your own cannabis to my space, but you can't bring any outside food or beverage.
Can you serve food? Can you serve food and alcohol in the lounge? You can.
I cannot serve alcohol in the cannabis lounge.
What about beer?
You cannot consume cannabis outside of the lounge, and that has everything to do with the HVAC system, right? Two things. Can't consume a cannabis outside the lounge in your room because the law says that a cannabis consumption area has to be vacated at 2:00 in the morning. So if I let you smoke in your room, I can't let you sleep in it. So I'm a hotel. Do I want to let you sleep in the room or do I want to let you smoke in the room? I can have one or the other. If I let you sleep in the room, all I got to do is change the sheets from the last guest. From the business I operate today, if I want to let you smoke in the room, I've got to add a 100x times air movement into your room. And so in this old historic Victorian 130-year-old property, I just don't have room.
I can imagine this kind of
much HVAC. I just don't have that much room to move all that HVAC. It's 90. Before I said 950 square feet. So a 950 square foot room with the 100x standard means I'll have 95,000 square feet of HVAC for that. Still, the hotel's 12, which means I have almost 8 times the volume of air, 7 times the volume of air moving in this 950 square foot lounge than I have moving through the property as a whole. Right. So there's one of the reasons you're going to just be in the lounge. The other, so the time at night and then when it have to open and close, and then more importantly, the HVAC. So the benefit, though, of creating this unique lounge is that we now have an amenity that doesn't exist yet and be a first to market at the pace we're going right now, or amongst the first, certainly, to execute the delivery of the lounge attached to a hotel. But because of that, I now have my hotel restaurant still active in the hotel that serves breakfast and now becomes a resource to serve food and beverage in the lounge. And we have a tavern that's recently opened to the public. So if you go to pattersoninn.com, you'll see this 12,000 square foot property. And in the larger structure on the left is the hotel with the tavern in the basement. On the smaller structure on the right is where the cannabis lounge is going. Attached but detached through the structure of the companies and where they all relate to each other. They're all tenants of a commercial building. They exist side by side with businesses that they legally can access from inside. And alcohol and cannabis created a unique conflict, but structure allowed a path to address that conflict and facilitate a solution. So that's the business here. My business at the end of the day, what I do is sell pillows. I rent pillows. I rent pillows with a wonderful comforter and sheets and rooms. I attract people because I have these other unique amenities, like a tavern downstairs with live food now. The location is one of the biggest assets, location. And then for the lounge, it's the address, 420.
320, right.
It's the necessity that we're so deep in the legalization, but yet the market still hasn't executed on these solutions, that it took policy 8 years at the state level and 9 years at the city level to catch up with the realities of legalization. We legalized production and distribution, and we've still stigmatized and created burdens and barriers to possession and consumption. And here I am dealing with it. I'm a year since my application was first dropped with the city, and I'm not under construction yet. It's been a year, and there are now 4 other applicants in Denver, one that's already withdrawn, and they haven't opened.
Well, see, because this is that's happening as well, and it was happening in Jamaica. It's slightly changing because of the whole application process. Licensing process takes so long. People are sitting on property that they built or building out, and they're just waiting. It's like, look, I don't have that kind of money to just keep fishing out for an entity that's not functioning. That's a really, really interesting structure that so tell me, well, again, this is, and as you just said, there's only been 3 applications. Is your business model is interesting. That must take a lot of explanation. You did the crowdfunding on Republic. How did that do? And what about direct investors? How has that gone? How is people responsible? What kind of questions do you get with regards to how to implement this smoking lounge, or even why bother to do that, to let them smoke wherever? How's that responsible?
I keep looking at my clock because you're going to hate me. I do have a 10 o'clock I've got to jump on for 20 minutes.
This always happens.
I'm happy to come back. I'm pretty flexible right after that for the next couple hours if you want to come back. But here's the answer to this question. We did do the last campaign on Republic, which was great. We had, I think, 284 investors come on board, which was critical to get us to where we are right now as far as having stamped and ready to build plans, be this deep into the designs associated with the HVAC system. I have now the contract with the final build out company. I have a general contractor that's pricing out for final build out right now. And once I have those hard costs, there'll be the next piece that I'll use to go out and make those types of asks, because we do need to raise more money at the 420 hotels to get to the next step. Individual investors, cannabis investors so far, lucky for me, I came to market right as everything's drying up. On the other side, so much of the money coming into cannabis has wrapped its head around understanding at least the risk associated with dispensaries and cultivation facilities. And here I am coming to the table with cannabis hospitality, but also with something that's very traditional, real estate. At the end of the day, the hotel, this is real estate. At the end of the day, this is a real estate venture where the cash flow operations of the overnight accommodations of the hotel and now the tavern are building wealth in the property through amortization of the loan, through repair and upkeep of the building, and through its operations. And then it becomes, how do I activate the space to make it something more unique and to differentiate from my competitors? And here it is now. So it's been hard to bridge that gap. The questions are cannabis people when cannabis returns, but so funny, they're looking for very large cannabis returns, higher than what even the market would dictate. But yet so many of these ventures are speculative, because at what point have we already saturated from a cultivation standpoint enough acreage, indoor and outdoor, to satisfy a national market? There was a pretty satisfied national market for the last 80 years, long before we legalized. How many more indoor greenhouses do we have to build to satisfy the market that was already satisfied? Quality, consistency, products you can test, that's the change. Reducing mold or removing mold because you're now working in a more curated or indoor environment, that becomes the change. But we might be at a point of saturation. So it's been interesting engaging with cannabis investors, because they're still looking, and they've learned and now understand what they want to at least implement on the continued build on the cannabis side. So I'm coming in with something new. Gone into those rooms because I didn't want to go. I've been in traditional hotel rooms, and that's a hard room, because they, by and large, are still not yet ready for cannabis. And that was true right before COVID, right after. I am dedicating the early part of next year, 2023, to start engaging in traditional hotel conference now, because explaining Cannabis 101 is something that some of us have signed up for. And I do recognize then the value in being a good advocate on behalf of normalization, destigmatization, bring what is now this 30 years as a consumer, but 12 years of being, directly engaged in policy, both locally, state, and when possible at the federal level, being engaged as far as a badged owner in an industry that's regulated, and have that badge now in my 7th year, to own a property that has secured licensing, right? It's a build out now and design, but the pieces that are the licensing is resolved. I have the license. It's now building it. This is the last piece. The next campaign that we're launching is on Start Engine. I'm excited about that because it's a good forum, not just to raise money, but to legitimize the business. Start Engine's at the top of the class when it comes to equity crowdfund. And so being on their platform.
Well, I guess because it's there's so much more we could discuss. I will let you get to your meeting. I would like to follow up.
Can we jump back on in a half an hour?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that because I do want to touch on some other points, because this is great information, and you're a pioneer.
I'm going to click this same link. I will see you in 30 minutes. I will see you at 10:30.
Right.
Sorry. Thank you.